Hello and welcome to The Habit Architect. My name is Michael Cups, and I'm glad you're with us again today. Be sure to like or follow and share our podcast with anybody you think that might enjoy it. We all start something along the way where we want to start a habit or we want to stop a bad habit. And we may try multiple times and we may have failures multiple times, but then there's something that clicks. Sometimes that thing is a very big thing, and sometimes it's a very small thing. And we've all experienced them. But sometimes in life, there's really big things that do alter the way we have to approach our days and weeks and months ahead. And those could be forced job changes. It could be forced moving circumstances or taking care of your parents or something. There's always something that can alter your life. And it's really how you react to those things that we're going to talk about today with our guest, Stacey Copas. She's a fantastic individual. She did have one of those life events that changed the course of who she is and what she's become, maybe is what I should say. And she's got an academy, she's got a book, and we're going to talk about all that. But at the heart of it all today is the topic of resilience. Don't forget to download the Time Bandit app or go get the book on Amazon if you're interested in what we talk about in Time Bandit. But as Stacey joins here, there she is, all the way from Australia. Good morning to you.
And good afternoon to you, Michael. It's so good to see you.
Yes. How are you?
I'm fabulous. I'm really
Great.
excited for our conversation today.
Me too. Well, why don't we start by you giving a better introduction of yourself than I just did. I think I covered the high points, but maybe a more detailed introduction from you.
Yeah, so Stacey Copas in Sydney, Australia, and I'm the founder of the Academy of Resilience, author of How to Be Resilient. And I've come to resilience, as you touched on, from major life changes. So I'm not an academic or an organizational psychologist. And for a long time, I felt that meant that I wasn't qualified to speak about resilience. And it wasn't until I was in a room full of CEOs and I said that exact piece, look, I'm not an academic, I'm not this. And they said, thank goodness for that.
Well, let's start with the definition. What would you define resiliency as?
I think that it got almost bastardized for a while there.
Yeah.
Over time, more and more resilience seems to become more synonymous with coping. So it's just, how do you cope? How do you survive? And for me, I think that's the absolute minimum. And I think it sells it really short. And also you hear a lot of people talking about, how do you bounce back? And to me also, I don't particularly like that because it just keeps implying that you just keep coming back to where you were. Whereas I see resilience as an opportunity to grow through a challenge rather than just go through it. It's how you grow, you learn, you build capacity. But the other difference in how I see it is, again, most people see resilience as reactive. It's what do you do when something goes wrong? I see resilience as being 75% proactive and things that we build a capacity for ahead of needing it. And probably 25%-ish is what do we do in those times when we do need to respond. That's been how I see it. And now there's even like a little bit more of an evolution of that because I realized that I was one of these people that was sort of pushing a little bit. I realized I didn't stop to sort of feel things in the time and it's like next, let's just keep marching forward. And over the last couple of years, I've realized now that it's so much more about actually just being in the moment, being present, looking at what's in front of us honestly, and then deciding what we do next from that.
And I could vouch for that. Well, so with that in mind, with that backdrop that you just mentioned there, when somebody comes and seeks your help with resiliency, do you find, you said 75% were prepare and 25% was because they're in something. Well, you were talking about resiliency in that regard, but are the people coming to you, are they in something that they need to work themselves out of, or are they coming proactively and saying, I need to build resilience?
I think most people seek things out when there's a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
That's human nature because we have limited capacity to take things on, and unless it's something that is really aligned with a goal or something that we're intentionally working towards, then a lot of people don't value it as a skill until they've needed it. And to me, it's like that old adage about needing to dig your well before you're thirsty, and resilience is much like that. And then so the majority of the times, if it's from a corporate perspective, the majority of the people that get me in have been that they're going through some kind of change. And so helping people to, how they actually respond and grow through that change, rather than a lot of times people think that change is being done to them and they take it very personally. So, being able to then help to reframe that is from a corporate perspective. I did a bit of stuff with, sales, so dealing with rejection and setbacks. But then the founders that I'm working with, a lot of them come to me because they're overwhelmed. And so they're overwhelmed, they're stressed. Sometimes it can be starting to impact either their health or their relationships, whether it's with their kids, whether they're with partner. So that seems to be the people that come to me via those channels. Or sometimes it may be they've been on a workshop with me and they've gone, oh my gosh, I want more Stacey in my life. And so there's a few little pieces there, but the majority, as all of us, we seek out the Band-Aid rather than the prevention most of the time.
Right. Yeah, I think it's just natural. There's sometimes this feeling of that's not going to happen to me, so they just keep going, and then all of a sudden it happens to them, right? And especially when you think about what you just described, they're feeling overwhelmed or stressed out. I mean, there's a mentality sometimes that we think, oh, that's not me. I'm fine. I've got everything in a row that I need in a row. But over time, there just becomes overwhelming, I think, and it can happen to you, right? Or it will happen to you, maybe. It's the way to say it.
Oh, definitely. And that's why I'm really looking at it now. And the frame that I'm looking at with founders is I want to help them build that capacity before it breaks.
Yes. Yeah. It's just helping them identify that they should prepare, I guess, is the challenge. Yeah. So if you were telling me, you say, Michael, you're a founder, what, think about this. What would the statement be for me to consider working on resiliency in advance?
Yeah, and it does come back to that piece around helping to build that strength before things break, and helping people to see that overwhelm doesn't have to be the default state. There is something different that you can do, and also too, particularly with a lot of founders, there's an element of isolation. And so many times people are doing this on their own, and then it's not the kind of thing that people then will talk to their partners about, because their partners don't get it. And sometimes their friends go, oh, geez, first world problems type of thing. And there's a perception from the outside that, oh, you're running your own, business, and, geez, life's great, and how good have you got it? And so that's a piece of it. So it's where people are looking for somewhere where they can actually be heard and be themselves, and just be able to be really open and honest about where things are, in where people aren't being judged for that. And there's a lot of people who've got similar experiences. So, and that's where there's that element of a unique situation that goes on there.
And I'm guessing you'd go through a series of conversations. It's not just a class that you take. It's probably a series of conversations. First, understanding what they're going through, and then, for lack of a better word, diagnose where to go next, right?
Yeah, definitely. And just starting really simply, that's something that's really important. And I know that you talk a lot about the connection between values and habits. And one of my core values is simplicity. And so I want to do things in a way, particularly people that are already overloaded and overwhelmed, is bringing it back to, it's almost that minimum effective dose. So what is it that I can, from what they've shared with me and where their intentions lie, how can I bring that back to the most simple thing that they could do consistently over time, that's then going to lead them to the outcome that they desire?
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. I do try. I didn't originally, when I wrote the book, I didn't talk about values as much. After I wrote the book and started talking to people, I had to find something that they could pin what they were trying to accomplish to. And it happens to be values because that's the deepest level, I think, that to get to. But where do you think how do you have that conversation? Are you talking about where do you bring in values, and where do you kind of map it, or how do you map it? Is that possible?
Yeah, I don't it's not something that I do consciously. A lot of that stuff comes up organically, and
Yeah.
really it's helping people to identify, what's important to them. And it's something, there's two things that come to mind on that. I love the story of Michelangelo and David, where Michelangelo was asked, what was his process for creating David? And he said, I just stripped away everything that wasn't David.
Yeah.
And so there's that aspect. And then just through organic conversation and just being super present with somebody, then I was talking to my boyfriend yesterday about this and about our conversation today. And he phrased it in a beautiful way. He said, the way you show up and allows people to unpeel their own onion.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, okay, I'd never really considered that before. But and I'm not a therapist, I'm not any of these things, but it's just through being present and curious and genuinely deeply caring for the people who are in front of me. And that's something that a lot of people haven't experienced before.
Yeah, I agree with you. And going back to what you said earlier about the simplest thing, sometimes just bringing it back to simplicity, I think that's incredibly powerful, right? Because that's what I like about the Eisenhower matrix is sometimes, somebody's got a list of 10 things to do. And then when you say, well, which ones are important and which ones are urgent, you kind of get down to a simplest thing. Well, it's these two. Okay, well then do those two things, right? And I like how do you help especially a founder who came to you and you said they're overwhelmed and they have these 20 things and they feel like if they drop any of them that they're going to let somebody down, or they'll let themselves down, or their company down. How do you help them through that?
Yeah, it's actually just going through and helping them to reconnect what really genuinely is important in that moment, because there is that thing and reminding people that if you try and do everything, you do nothing. And just coming back, as you said, it's that it is a prioritization, and sometimes just people saying it out loud. Like, again, they figure it out. They often figure it out for themselves rather than me perhaps suggesting which one it might be the priority. Then it's a matter of going, well, okay, you've figured it out. Again, unpeeled their own onion and just stripped away all those bits bit by bit, but doing it in a way that just brings them back to what's important.
Yep. And from the individual, I get it seems very straightforward. I know it's not. It's complex to work through. But so when you hear a company say we're building a resilient workforce, is that even possible?
Oh, it's so interesting because there's been so many times over the years where people go, yeah, we really want to build a resilience program. And I go, so what are you doing? And they go, we offer yoga at lunchtime.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nice. That's a piece of the puzzle.
Right.
But and also here in Australia, around workplace health and safety, most of the states in Australia have brought in stuff around psychological safety and psychological harms. So it has become a little bit more top of mind. So they might go, okay, look, we need to then build that. But again, there's lots of different, ways that people can do it. But the big thing is it's not just a one and done. It's not, okay, let's just get Stacey or someone like me to come in and do a talk. And it's not like you can read a book and suddenly that's a magic thing. And so it's helping them to realize that these are things that need to be, it's an ongoing program. It's not just, hey, let's just do a morning tea and get a guest speaker in.
Right. Yeah. And the yoga program. It's amazing that some companies just kind of say that one thing was check the box for resiliency, right? But so we're at a shift right now that I think I don't think it's going to eliminate all humans. I'm sorry, I'm in a public place that if you're hearing background noise, but the AI has this. I mean, there's imminent, I don't want to call it threat because I think there's a coexistence that's going to work itself out. But in the meantime, there's going to be people that lose their job, whether it was because of AI or because the CEOs and CFOs wanted to reduce costs, and they use that as an excuse to, to reduce headcount. But there is that shift, right? And particularly if you're in a certain type of job like a developer, where AI can write code that you used to write. Now there's probably different aspects of where the humans are going to fit in with that, but right now it looks like what are we going to do? It is imminent threat, right? So companies, I think, have to think about this. I mean, any recommendations around this? I mean, for an individual and then maybe for the company.
Yeah, let's start with the individual. So I think the big thing is being very conscious again around what's important. Again, not losing sight of, the things that are important. And a lot of the time those things are not work, their family, their health, they're all of these things. So, and then coming back to, what's within our control, because it's so often that we spend so much time, worrying ourselves into states of anxiety about the maybes and they're all the things that are completely out of our control. So it's really important to do this sort of stuff. And because so often it's the thinking about the stuff that is so much worse than the actual thing. Yes. And often too, we can, what we think about is so powerful and so important that we can actually create some of these situations, by being in that state. And obviously we can't make clear decisions when we're in that state either. So it's about just trying to be intentional and grounded and looking after the things that we can control. And then also going, well, okay, look, reality is, particularly if you are a coder or something like that, then, things can be, there is a threat, but also looking at it and flipping it on its head and go, well, where's the opportunity in this too? Exactly. So, it's just the, what do they say, the two sides of the same coin type of thing.
Right.
So, that's an important thing, and just go, well, okay, what's an area that, what can I do that an AI can't, or how do I actually work with AI to supercharge what I actually do? From an organizational perspective, it really comes down to leadership and how they actually communicate and the energy that they have around this as well, because the language that's used by leaders in how they talk about these things has a direct impact on how their teams experience it. So if they're, talking about, from a fear perspective and everything that's awful and, really being overly dramatic, there's an element of being real, but it's also, having an element of optimism, like not being toxically positive, but actually just, leading the way, and again talking about the opportunities and growth and, and change as possibility rather than it being something really negative.
Yeah. And I wanted to go back. I agree with that. And I want to talk about leadership in a minute because it brought back a memory of mine. But the individual, I think the challenge is, even if you read LinkedIn, and I know you're on LinkedIn and people can find you there and all that stuff, and you've got some great posts, by the way. Whoever's watching, Stacey's a great follow, so do follow her. But it can be ominous, right? So if you're just scrolling, just yesterday or today, I read an article that says, your job's over, what are you going to do? And it never offered any advice. It just said, just the doom and gloom. And that's what sells, right? So fear sells, unfortunately. And so I think it's interesting that we need to start giving people options to think about it differently. And it's not showing up there really. And because the algorithms are picking the fear-based things, right? So if you're in a job and just in general, Stacey, if you have a job and you think that there's a shift coming in that job, right, whatever it may be, what should you do? You said first, think about what's really important. Second, you said the imagination was what you think it's not going to be as bad as you think it will be. But is that really still critical steps we should be thinking about, and how far out should you think about it?
Yeah, I think, look, things change so quickly that we really can't get too far ahead. Because remember we used to do 5-year, 10-year plans. Like, it's irrelevant now. Like, it's no point going that far out. If anything, it's like, okay, have a bit of an overarching intention for perhaps the year, but, bring that back to, 90 days, 30 days. What do I do this week? What do I do today? And so two things, and having that element of being really proactive about, building our capacity. So see, resilience and, these type of things are really important, looking after our physical health, but also then being curious about it. Because if we look at it from a place of curiosity and then go, what are the possibilities in this? And, one of the, particularly through, the 2020, 2022 era, those few years there where everyone was like, oh, this uncertainty is so bad, then I flipped it and I'm like, when nothing is certain, then anything is possible too. And so again, it's just that it's the same situation, but looking at it through a different lens can make such a difference.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful statement that you said, that when there was so much that changed, then anything's a possibility. And we saw that, right? We saw retailers that no longer had people walking through their doors to buy stuff. They created curbside service, and it was an interesting morph of what happened. And in some cases, those systems are still in place. We didn't go back to the old way, right? So, from an organizational perspective, and I'm not saying this to talk about me or my career, but I remember a time when the financial markets really crashed in the U.S. and I was managing a sales and marketing team. It was about 18, 20 people in there, and it felt hopeless because the people we sold our software to weren't buying because the financial markets crashed. And we all thrashed around a little bit about what are we going to do. And to me, it just came to this point where it's like, we can't control that. What we can control is how we show up every day, how what we do with that amount of time in helping our existing customers that have already bought get through whatever they're getting through. And then on the other side of that, there'll be loyal customers if we do a good job and we're not showing up asking them for money, right? When we know they don't have any. And I think, and with that, some of them went away, right? They either quit or we had to downsize or whatever. But at the end of the day, that was the right thing to do. And it's really hard to do that when you're a founder or something. I would think the people you talk to about just saying, hey, what we can control is all we can do, right? This is what we can control. So let's control that and let's do it really well. Is that good advice or not a good advice?
Oh, look, it is. And it's also too, it's being honest about it too. And it's going, look, this situation really sucks, because there is an element of going, oh, like, I've got to just put on the brave face and I need to keep moving. But there is an element of actually stopping and looking at it and going, this is a really crappy situation. It is. And just being real with that. And particularly if there are people where you're in leadership and you're a team and you can go, look, this is really hard. And I just acknowledge that, because I think a lot of times that the challenge comes is because we don't actually stop and feel that for a moment and then be real. And that's why coming back to it's like looking at reality honestly and then deciding what to do from there. And because I think we need to acknowledge we're emotional beings. And so we need to actually check in with that for a bit first. And so, looking about, okay, well, what are my feelings about this? And then what are the facts? And then make that decision from that point forward.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that must be hard when a team sees their leader trying to cover up the truth, right? That's a very difficult situation. Do you have any recommendations for them? Just keep pointing at the truth. Is that the answer?
Yeah, look, you obviously don't want to scare people when things are a little bit dark. But again, just being real, and a leader can just turn around and go, look, again, this is hard, and I'm concerned, but not then catastrophize and awfulize the situation, because people see if there's an incongruence between what people are saying and what their face is saying and what their body language is saying. And so, it's an element of that, trying to just straddle that space between being human and being real, but then also, being a leader, because that's the whole thing is like you need a leader that's going to actually then, be inspiring, be someone that's going to reconnect them with why they're there. What each person's specific job, like why is that important and how does that fit with the big picture? Because that can be an issue where people think, well, what's the point? This is all hopeless. But if you can connect that together and then communicate that well, then you can really do that, and it creates a bit of team strength as well. It's build culture, and some of those things are built in the tough times, because there is an element where again, it's where the focus, we get what we focus on. So helping to lead towards rather than lead from fear.
Yeah, I like that. So you're chief onion peeler. That's your role now, as your boyfriend's pointed out. But at 11 years old, you probably weren't thinking that was your career choice, right? And so can you walk us through how you said you're not classically trained as a therapist or anything. So how did this become you?
Yeah. So 11, 12 years old. I was very focused. I was very motivated. I knew what I wanted in my life. I wanted to be a vet, and I'd gotten into a competitively selective secondary college focused on agriculture. I was an athlete. I was the pitcher in the softball team. I was the first girl to play soccer, at my school. And then one afternoon, I was cooling off in a backyard pool and trying to be a perfectionist and get my dive right. It went catastrophically wrong, and I ended up 3 hospitals later being told that I'd broken my neck and drowned, and that I'd never walk again. And so, at that point, that felt like a death sentence to me. And I spent a lot of years in a pretty dark place, but was good at like, nothing to see here, everything's great. And it wasn't until getting through that, being able to reframe how I looked at that situation, eventually becoming deeply and genuinely grateful for what had happened and how it changed my life. And it wasn't then until my late 20s, early 30s, I actually got into personal development. And because people were very surprised, I'm like, I didn't feel very motivated. And so I learned that. And then, of course, which happens with a lot of people around us see something in us before we see it in ourselves. And so I worked with a couple of mentors, and I was starting to learn about how to speak and how to write and do all this stuff, but I did not want to tell my own story. I wanted to, I'd done some, work with people with disabilities in developing countries, and I wanted to talk about that. But this particular mentor, he said, Stacey said, you need to be, and I said, no, everyone's going to think I'm a total wanker for talking about myself. Tall poppy is very a problem in Australia. And he said, no, you've got to get over yourself. It's not about you. It's about the audience. And with a story like yours and the lessons that you've learned, if you don't share with others, you're being selfish.
Yep.
How could I argue with that? And then it was a few months after that I was on a stage sharing the 5-minute version of my story for the first time. And 6 months after that, I left my last job in employee land and started my business, and I've been talking about resilience ever since.
Wow. How was that first 5-minute discussion?
Terrifying.
But you must have done wonderful at it and liked it, right?
Yeah. And it was like they call them a speak off now, but way before that was a thing. And so there was a whole stack of us had 5 minutes on a stage, and it was competitive. And I could not believe that people laughed and cried in 5 minutes. And I was the joint winner of that. And that was the starting point. And for the next 2 days at this event, I was constantly inundated with people telling me about what that connected with them, what it meant to them, what they were going to do from that. And I'm like, my gosh, 5 minutes. Like, what if? And so I worked with, mentors on how to then create that into a full keynote, which then evolved into an ebook, and then the book that I published and the work that I do now.
Nice. Yes, that's fantastic. What an amazing turnaround from, your dreams were shattered to you found a purpose, right? That's just fantastic.
It's huge. And
Yeah.
I can say with absolute certainty that what I've been able to do as a result of that injury and the impact it had in my life, I'm so grateful for all of that adversity, all of that challenge, because then it's given me insights and perspectives that others would never have. And then I'm so privileged now to be able to then share that with others, and through the lens of narrative, because
Right.
when things are shared through a narrative, then they connect and they're memorable too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Stacey, thanks so much for sharing that. I think it's a beautiful story, and the fact that you're now helping others is that's a gift in and of itself, I think. And it still worked for you sometimes, but it's still a gift, and I'm glad you're doing it. I'm glad it found you, or you found it, whatever it was. But I have to ask you, because I ask every guest, what is one non-negotiable habit that Stacey has every day or every week?
Oh my gosh, my non-negotiable is journaling, and
I love it.
July this year will be 11 years that I have not missed a night. Like,
Wow.
it's that non-negotiable for me.
That's
Yes.
fantastic. And is it,
Yeah.
I mean, when you journal, is it just, sometimes when I journal, I just write a sentence about my day, really tired or something like that, because I don't want to finish it, but I do try to do it every day, but I haven't done 11 years of it. So
Yeah.
what kind of journaling do you do? Is it about reflecting? Is it about tomorrow? Is it a little bit of all that?
Started out as reflection, and
Mhm.
my commitment to myself was just to write one sentence, because I think people see journaling as like, oh, I'm not a good writer, I don't know what to write about, and a
Mhm.
perception that you need to write like a whole page every day. And so I started out with a commitment for 90 days was my initial commitment, and that I'm
Mhm.
just going to write a sentence about what was the best thing that happened that day.
Yeah.
And of course, then that evolves and it expands. And now the way I teach it is I teach it as, it's like one sentence journaling. Just start with one sentence. And the
Yes.
prompt that I give people is, today I had the opportunity to, and then
Nice.
just complete the sentence. Like, I do mine electronically. So
Yep.
I've got, a program that I use. And
Yep.
so, and I just sort of do it on my phone. Sometimes I'll do voice to text if I've got lots on my mind.
Right.
And so it started out just the reflection. Sometimes it'll be, a bit of it's almost like a log of the different things I did that day. Sometimes it might be that I'll dig deep into a conversation that I had, or, a line that I heard, like, Ruben yesterday talking about people unpeeling their own onion.
Yeah.
And so I thought about that a bit when I was journaling last night. And then sometimes it can be around setting intentions for
Yes.
what's coming up. But I used to joke that it's probably saved me tens of thousands in therapy, but it's absolute
Yes,
truth. It's the
it
most
is.
transformational thing I've ever done. And everyone that knows me knows that a journal is done before I go to bed of a night.
That's fantastic. That's a great streak too. We talk about tracking habits and streaks. That's a long one. So that's fantastic. That's great advice too. I love it. I think journalism is one of the most powerful things that people don't know about. And I work. Some of my guests know this, but I work with in an addiction center on weekends. I volunteer and facilitate, and sometimes not full time. I'm not as much as some of those other people do that are fantastic. But one of the things that we're seeing more of is gambling addictions, and especially with mobile phones, right? And it's so easy now that the algorithms just get them hooked. That I've been telling people, every time you feel that urge, write it down. Right, not on your phone. Just get a pen and paper, get very analog, and write down what made you feel like you needed to get back into that app. And if nothing else, it just diverts their attention. But I think when they start writing it down, they start finding reasons that they feel that way, and they can start unpeeling that onion, as you've seen with your customers. So I think journaling is a great habit. I'm glad you brought it up. A lot of people talk about different habits. That's my favorite one, though. So thank you so much. So people see you on this podcast or on LinkedIn. How do they contact you? What's the best way to engage with Stacey?
Yeah, definitely. LinkedIn is the best place to get hold of me. I'm on there all the time. I manage my own LinkedIn. So if you send me a message, you're going to get me. And I absolutely adore, one of the things I'm most grateful for is the conversations that happen as a result of a podcast or a speaking engagement or someone reading, a post that I've done. And I love those conversations. So I welcome people to reach out. And I especially love to hear what resonated most with people, and what they may do differently as a result of that. So I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great advice too. Thank you so much, Stacey, for telling your story, for helping people understand, that circumstances can get better. And I really appreciate your perspective. And I hope there's a lot of people peeling onions in front of you for the rest of this year and on. So that's fantastic. I love that analogy. I'm going to use that everywhere. I'm going to say, well, call Stacey. She'll unpeel your onion with you. So
Yeah, I love it so much. Thank you so much, Michael. I've loved this conversation.
yeah, thank you so much too for joining us so early in the morning too. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Do stay tuned for the next episodes. And of course, as I mentioned before, download Time Bandit and also like and forward and subscribe to all your favorite podcast channels. Thank you very much. See you next time.